Semler Scientific, the original strategy copycat. This is a public company that is a healthcare company, and they adopted the Saylor playbook, and they have been buying Bitcoin rapidly. Are they undervalued? Are they overvalued? Are they interesting to look at? I'm going to be diving deep into some analysis that I found on the company and giving my own thoughts about Semler. My name is Forrest Hodel. I'm a Bitcoin educator, and you can book me for a one-on-one session to talk about Bitcoin basics, best practices for security needs, and we can answer the questions that you might not even know to ask because you don't know what you don't know if you're just getting into this space. So you book me for a session in the link in the description. So here we have the Ultimate Investment Thesis Guide for Semler Scientific by Chris Miles. You should definitely follow Chris. He makes these for a lot of different companies. We're talking about Semler because I've gotten a lot of requests and I think that it is a unique and interesting story. We're going to go through this and I'm going to expand on some of the thoughts that he had. So as I said, they are in the healthcare category and now finance in some degree with their Bitcoin treasury company. So the business, Semler Scientific is a medical diagnostics company that has pivoted to becoming a Bitcoin treasury company. So their main product is called QuantaFlo, which is a type of device to detect some certain types of heart conditions. And there is an older test that doesn't require this device, but is less effective at diagnostics. And so their QuantaFlo, if you look at their stock, their QuantaFlo actually got accepted into Medicare or Medicaid, or there was some sort of government program that adopted this. And that really elevated the value of this company quite a lot. Then they got taken out of that program. And so now it's only private practices, private medical practices that have to buy this product. And that is how this company can make money with their healthcare sector of their company. So they probably have some sort of sales team, some sort of development team on their healthcare side, and they are actively trying to pursue that as a business. Between October 2024 and April 2025, Semler increased its Bitcoin holdings by 243%, 1,012 to 3,467, and it increased Bitcoin per share by 162%. So it's the second U.S. public company to adopt Bitcoin, publicly traded. They are targeting 105,000 Bitcoin by 2027. Substantial runway for Bitcoin yield, rapidly expanding options market, free call option on operating business, headwinds subsiding. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. Free call option on operating business. So right now, Semler is trading close to its MNAV. So their market cap and liabilities are trading similar to or very close to the value of their Bitcoin holdings. So you're essentially, if you buy this stock, right now you're buying it at the value of just their Bitcoin, but they're not just their Bitcoin. They also have this healthcare business. So that's why it's been written here, free call option on operating business. So right there, that seems, again, like an opportunity. Rapidly expanding options market. I think, there is this saying, there is no second best. And I think the options market, there's options market for different things, but liquidity is incredibly important. And there's volatility within Semler. There is option play within there, and that allows them to do interesting products and maybe tap into convertible bonds where those have been less attractive, but still a way for a company to acquire Bitcoin when they don't have the ability to perhaps issue a preferred yet, which are a better option than convertible bonds. And the other thing here, headwinds subsiding. So I believe they had some sort of lawsuit that they settled. I don't really actually know that much information about it. I just know some offhand kind of headline information, but that is all settled and kind of behind them, and that was actually a big depressor to the stock price when that was going on. So risk, stalled Bitcoin flywheel. As much as it sounds like, oh, you're buying the company at its Bitcoin value, but it's not that, and it's going to acquire Bitcoin. It's got this Bitcoin per share increase. So that means that it's going to go up in price because of that. Well, if it's trading at its MNAV, they cannot necessarily do the strategy of issuing new shares into the market and acquire Bitcoin in an accretive way. Say they're at a 1-to-1. If they sell shares and buy Bitcoin, they're not actually increasing the Bitcoin per share because they're diluting by the same amount. So the MNAV needs to be high. So there's these other companies, Smarter Web company, MetaPlanet, even Strategy trading at like a 1.8 MNAV, which means when they sell a share, they essentially get $1.80 for selling a dollar bill because they're diluting by one share, but they're increasing their Bitcoin yield by 1.8 ratio of that share. The other risk here, Bitcoin extinction event. Of course, that should be a risk for all of these and is not necessarily a real risk, right? It's very, very low on the percentage scale. So it's not really necessary to quantify that in my opinion, but nonetheless, it's in there. And of course, it's going to be affected by Bitcoin price, which is prolonged severe decline in Bitcoin's price, and custodial failure resulting in loss of Bitcoin holdings. So this is going to be the case along all of these because these are Bitcoin accumulation companies or Bitcoin treasury companies. And they, of course, have to deal with a licensed holder and custodian of the Bitcoin as publicly traded companies. So one thing I also want to add to this risks that Kristen put here is Eric Semler multiple times in his speech at the Bitcoin conference in Vegas in May, and since then on multiple podcasts I've listened to, has talked about how Semler is the most levered Bitcoin treasury company in the US, and therefore it benefits the most from that leverage when Bitcoin goes up in value, right? Because you're getting a more levered play on Bitcoin's price. Now, leverage goes both ways. So prolonged severe decline in Bitcoin's price is the leverage at such a level where they could become in danger of having to maybe make decisions that aren't favorable for the shareholders. Not necessarily. But again, the market is going to treat their stock in a way that quantifies that leverage. So they're going to go down further, and potentially go up faster, further when Bitcoin's price moves. Again, that is a risk that you're taking with Semler. So let's go on here. Conclusion, too long didn't read. Sentiment around Semler is at its lowest right now, but the tide is turning. As headwinds turn into tailwinds, sentiment can quickly turn positive. Due to its low MNAV, Semler offers an asymmetrical setup. If the Bitcoin flywheel begins to spin, the upside is explosive. If it doesn't, the downside is limited. Heads I win, tails I don't lose much. So I would just expand on this. Tails I don't lose much, except the opportunity cost of buying what is more likely a something that will increase Bitcoin, for instance. So the opportunity cost of just not buying Bitcoin, or maybe something that is bigger, more established, has more of a moat, like MSTR. And the other thing here too is because the MNAV is low, it makes it very difficult for them to issue debt. If they issue debt, there's going to be a interest component to that they have to service. Now, if they can sort of get their business more operational and profitable, they could service that debt just with the business income, and that would allow them to grow their Bitcoin per share, and the market would put a more of a premium on the Bitcoin holdings they have, essentially increasing the MNAV. And I think that is really what Semler needs to do. And I think that if, at this point where their MNAV is very close, it can be very difficult to increase it. And it's, they need to protect that MNAV with their business because they don't necessarily have the ability to get very, very positive accretive debt on their balance sheet. They do have some ability, but I'm just saying they're not the best position for that. Okay, so let's talk about the business. I'm going to skip these quotes here. What is Semler Scientific? It's a medical diagnostics company that has pivoted to becoming a Bitcoin treasury company. Semler's main product is QuantaFlow, was highly adopted by Medicare Advantage issuers. So through the Medicare system, driving the stock 13,600% from 2016 to 2021. Insane. Regulatory changes hurt the business model and the stock declined dramatically. Eric Semler stepped in as an activist to control the board. They pivoted to a Bitcoin treasury, became the second U.S. public corporate company to adopt Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. DOJ settlement. This is what I was talking about before. Semler faced an unexpected DOJ settlement in February 2024, stemming from a 2017 probe they had fully cooperated with for years. Until February, they had no indications of wrongdoing. The case escalated suddenly amid a broader Medicare/Medicaid crackdown. During 2 months of the settlement talks, they were restricted from buying Bitcoin, which unfortunately coincided with broader market turbulence. Since resolving the matter, they've resumed their Bitcoin strategy aggressively. Okay, that's quite interesting. I did not realize, I've not been keeping super close tabs on what Semler's been doing, as I'm not actually an investor, but they've resumed the Bitcoin strategy aggressively. That's interesting. We'll take a further look at that if it isn't covered in this docket. What problem is the business trying to solve? On their operating business side, the problem Semler is attempting to solve is early detection of cardiovascular disease to reduce costly late-stage interventions and improve patient outcomes. Does the business have product market fit? If so, what is it? On the operating business side, Semler Scientific has a clear product market fit. Its FDA cleared QuantaFlow device enables fast, non-invasive PAD detection, aligning with issuers' push for preventative care. Strong reoccurring revenue and adoption by major providers confirm real demand. So this is an interesting one here. Where is the business on its adoption curve? Chris has said that it's in the innovators stage. It's not in the early adopters, early majority, late majority, or laggards. I would say it is in the innovator stage. It's the second public company to adopt a Bitcoin treasury company reserve strategy, and it also kind of seems to be an innovator in its technology that is developing for the healthcare side of its business as well. Okay, so their capital levers are the at-the-market ATM offerings, so they can issue new shares into the market. This only works, again, if the MNAV is high. And they can also do convertible debt. So convertible debt works really well for very high implied volatility companies, so stocks that move really quite a lot, because it's a debt instrument. It's like a bond, but with the ability to convert at a future date when the debt becomes due, or when it becomes high enough in price that it hits an early conversion clause. And then these conversion prices are typically 30% above market or 40% or whatever. It depends on the terms and the favorable terms they can get within the convert market. Now, convertible debt we found is great for getting a lot of cash, but it has its downsides. So it limits volatility because the people buying these convertible debt instruments are usually delta hedge traders. So they will buy the bond as their long position and they will short the stock and they'll become delta neutral. And then they will either apply more shorts or buy back their shares depending on what the price does, and basically make profit from doing so. So they're also lowering volatility by that, and they're adding a lot of shorts to the underlying common stock, which is what we are buying. And their long position in the convertible bond isn't applying buying pressure to that common stock. So all we see is the selling pressure. So a good example of this is the GameStop chart. They've issued 2 convertible bonds so far, and each time they've done this, their stock has rocketed downwards, and well, plummeted downwards is maybe a better way of saying it. And that's because of the arb traders loading on the shorts. However, again, it's a good way to acquire a lot of capital, and they can buy a lot of Bitcoin with that and potentially push their MNAV up if they're seen by the market as a company that's acquiring a huge amount of Bitcoin, and especially pushing up the Bitcoin per share metric. So what I just explained there, I should really have looked this over before I read it, but Yeah, Chris does a really good job here of actually writing out and explaining what a convertible bond is and how convertible bond arbitrage works. So if my definition or explanation of it was a little bit confusing to you, again, I would recommend checking out this article. And I do have 2 previous videos about that as well that fully explain it. All right, so let's take a look at these mental models. What mental models are relevant either for or against? The 3 Semler premiums. Semler leverages 3 premiums. A, Bitcoin premium, B, equity premium, C, convertible bond premium. All 3 premiums create and fuel each other. It's also important to note that Semler can issue convertible bonds at a premium even when trading at a 1x MNAV. This in and of itself justifies and reinforces a higher MNAV, which creates a positive feedback loop. The Semler trifecta. Semler is powered by 3 core drivers that all fuel each other. 1, Bitcoin torque equals return on capital. 2, Bitcoin yield equals growth in Bitcoin per share. 3, MNAV equals premium to net asset value. So higher Bitcoin torque increases Bitcoin yield and as a result, it justifies as a higher MNAV. Higher Bitcoin yield justifies as a higher MNAV and as a result increases Bitcoin torque. Higher MNAV increases Bitcoin torque and as a result increases Bitcoin yield. So these all work on each other by having the Bitcoin premium, equity premium, convertible bond premium all working together. They can hopefully increase that MNAV and increase the volatility and issue convertible bonds at a premium. So all these things can kind of work together. And that's really what I see happening. I don't necessarily see a market for Semler today to be issuing other types of debt like Strategy is with the preferreds. I think the market would be too illiquid to do that potentially. And I think convertible bonds, there's the possibility that because Strategy hasn't been doing that, that these smaller companies, these companies looking for additional strategies can continue to hit the convertible bonds when it isn't the best, most optimal way. But because of their relative size, they can increase the Bitcoin per share faster than the giant of MSTR and potentially see an outperformance in share price based on that. So here are some of the opportunities. Let's see, Semler Scientific is targeting 105,000 Bitcoin by 2027 through a phased acquisition strategy, starting with 10,000 Bitcoin by 2025. The aggressive accumulation provides substantial runway for generating Bitcoin yield. Market mispricing. Semler has been trading at a very modest 1.3x MNAV. Okay, so I thought it was actually lower than that. Way below its peers in the Bitcoin Treasury company market. However, there are several reasons for this. Overhang from legacy healthcare business and ongoing legal challenges, low liquidity and limited options activity, market uncertainty around its Bitcoin strategy velocity, high short interest. Low liquidity and limited options market is something I already mentioned. Overhang from legacy healthcare business is interesting because it's actually being seen as a negative right now, but it's possible they could turn that around. And although it wouldn't be as valuable as having, the value of it in Bitcoin, perhaps, I think in a downturn, if they continue to have something that is uncorrelated from Bitcoin's downturn and they're able to have a profitable business, they could actually they could use their healthcare business to defend the MNAV. I think it's very important for companies to have an ability to defend the MNAV so that they can continue to issue shares in an accretive way and buy Bitcoin potentially in a bear market when Bitcoin is cheaper and they're actually able to acquire more sats per dollar and still having that MNAV positive to do so. Importance of PR, retail, and community. This is incredibly interesting to me, and I'll tell you why in a second here. So Eric has acknowledged the need for better public presence and engagement with the Bitcoin community. He has made it clear that he is focused on increasing transparency, boosting community engagement via influencers and metrics, reporting Bitcoin yield, Bitcoin gain, and shareholder count. Eric, let me know if you need to boost community engagement via influencers, and I will put on this Semler hat for you, as others have, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. All right, so Eric has stated Semler aims to strategically expand its range of products with preferred equity, reducing over-reliance on ATM issues. So that it goes against what I said earlier. They do actually want to do some preferred fixed income stock. So maybe they believe that there's a market for that, and maybe there is. I mean, it's a big market. I just thought that it would be potentially difficult for them to have an ATM open on those if there's not enough liquidity. But I suppose any liquidity still exists. They could issue new shares into that if there's enough trading volume. They could be a part of that market to some degree, even if it's significantly less, say, than strategies. All right, this is interesting. Indexes inclusion. Semler is already included in the Russell 2000. It's a major market cap weighted index. Currently, they are in the lowest allocation tier, meaning any upward momentum in market cap could trigger significant passive inflows as their weighting increases. So this would be a passive bid and a natural reason for them to have an MNAV above 1, because there's sort of these forced buyers that are in this index specifically, the Russell 2000. All right, so let's take a look at the main risks. Stalled Bitcoin flywheel. Failure to build momentum and activate the Bitcoin flywheel in order to expand MNAV means Semler can't issue equity at a premium to buy more Bitcoin accretively. Without that, Bitcoin yield stagnates, limiting growth, weakening investor interest, and reducing its valuation relative to peers. There's better options out there as seen by the market participants when they're looking at Semler, and that is visible in its pricing. Is that going to be the truth into the future? That's debatable. I mean, you can see here there are some reasons to be pretty bullish on this stock. Okay, so let's take a look at this one and see if there's any information that is specific to Semler. So prolonged decline in Bitcoin price. If Bitcoin experiences a prolonged and significant decline in price, Semler may be forced to issue substantial equity dilution to repay a maturing convertible bond. This is assuming that alternative capital raising options or refinancing avenues are unavailable. While this wouldn't be catastrophic for the company, it could meaningfully erode its market cap. There most likely would be other ways they could refinance if one of their convertible bonds came due. And I hope to actually try to find some information, if I can, about their convertible bonds. We'll take a look at that. So key members, Eric Semler. Eric Semler is actually kind of a G. He's pretty well respected in Wall Street. And yeah, I would recommend reading this. Joe Burnett, who I plan to actually have on this show pretty soon, joins Semler Scientific as Director of Bitcoin Strategy in June 2025. Joe brings institutional level planning and implementation know-how. His experiences ensures the yield strategies and treasury risk management are professionally executed. Natalie Brunell joined in May 2025. Natalie Brunell's appointed adds trust, reach, and credibility in the Bitcoin community and aligns the board composition with Semler's identity as a Bitcoin company. We will see. We will see how both of these people actually are able to improve Semler's retail outreach, their ability to engage the Bitcoin community and bring not credibility. I mean, credibility is important, but bring interest, right? There needs to be some interest in this stock. There is a lack of interest in this stock. And will these two be able to do that? We will see. Okay, so let's look at the valuation that Chris has done here. What are the potential returns and what probability do you assign to this? Excluding Bitcoin's price appreciation, Semler appears undervalued by 100 to 400% based solely on its potential to generate 100 to 400% Bitcoin yield in the coming years. Okay, so yeah, this is interesting. I do think that Semler will be able to acquire a lot more Bitcoin and it be accretive to their shareholders in the Bitcoin per share metric. And so I do agree with this. It's just really the question of, does the market agree with this as well, and will their price reflect that? And is your money better placed somewhere else? That is one of the problems with the smaller Bitcoin treasury companies. Once you start playing in that field, you can kind of set it and forget it in MSTR. You can 100% set it and forget it in Bitcoin. When you go down or when you go further on the risk curve, you start to not be able to set it and forget it because there's things like a DOJ, problem. There's things like, certain strategies not working out, or one other company sort of drawing more attention, and you start to having to actively jump from, trade to trade, position to position, can you have a long-term vision on this? And do you think Semler is going to outperform other companies in this exact field for a really long period of time? So is there a trade here? Is there a short-term trade, a medium-term, long-term, or forever hold? That's kind of the question you need to ask yourself with these. For me, MSTR is a forever hold. Now, when we go further out on the risk curve, there might be a trade. There might be a trade in here for Semler, for me. But I do think that potentially there are other options for longer term holds that Semler does not meet those criteria for me. And that's why I'm not a shareholder. I'm not a shareholder because I think that my money is better placed elsewhere. That's not to say that Semler, again, won't have 100 to 400% increase over the coming years. I think that is possible. And I think, again, even within and including Bitcoin's price and the leverage within there, it could be way higher. But the other Bitcoin treasury companies could do the same. And they're all going to be relative or like within that same basket. And you're putting your money on the team, you're putting your money on the strategy, the execution, the future guidance. This is what you do as an investor. So it's good to take all of this in and recognize, is Semler going to be the one, right? And I think the only reason that I question what I'm saying here is this part right here. Is it deservedly cheap or undeservedly cheap? It's undeservedly cheap. This is sort of more of an idea of timing the market, right? If it's completely undervalued, it could outperform based on when you get into a position, right? Because of your cost basis, it could outperform, where other treasury companies that are what I just said as kind of having a better place to put your money, they could already be like, they're not undeservedly cheap, right? They're maybe overpriced or fairly priced or not as undeservedly cheap. So because of that, there's this opportunity for it to go back to fair value or beyond fair value if they execute really well or something like that. And that is the opportunity here in my eyes. That is the opportunity with Semler, but there are some risks. And I think we've adequately discussed the risks here with Semler. That's it for the ultimate investment thesis, but let's look a little bit deeper. All right, so let's take a look at Semler. We can actually see that there was a big price appreciation here all the way up to close of around 75, and we're now at 42. So there is the potential for it to run up a lot higher, and you can see there's been a lot of negative sentiment and sort of keeping it depressed for a long time here. So what I did here is I went to the daily, and I've actually put in since the beginning of IBIT's creation and how Semler has done since IBIT has come out. You can see there's basically, I think this is the DOJ thing here in February 2024 that happened. So, there's a big decorrelation from the price action of Bitcoin. There's some connection. You can see that it connects a little bit to Bitcoin, but it's, it really decoupled. And then as Bitcoin began to rip up, you can see Semler's actually ripped up. And in proportion, you can see it's actually did way higher at those times, right? 229% to 63% at the time there with a massive run up. So the leverage of Semler, the interest in Semler, that does seem to work in the upswings, or it did at least. And you can see now we saw another drawdown of Bitcoin's price, and Bitcoin has sort of rebounded, gone to all-time highs again. And where is Semler? But Semler has decoupled again. So it is traded sideways. It's traded sideways since February 2025. What we can see is since IBIT has come out, Semler has performed negative 8.38%, whereas IBIT is up 127%. So of course you were way better off buying Bitcoin and holding for that entire duration compared to Semler. but will that forever be the case? We can see this big divergence happening here. Will Semler begin to catch up? Will it surpass it? Will it just have a nice, decent run to where it was before and have a massive outperformance compared to IBIT? If IBIT goes up, 20%, will Semler go up 40, 60, 70%, right? Back to its all-time highs in this time frame of IBIT, right? It's something to consider. I'm not 100% sure, right? It has decoupled. It is undervalued. There is the possibility that in this consolidation period of Semler, if they are able to, in the future here, turn their business around and acquire more Bitcoin and get more interest, it is possible that this is an accumulation zone for a position, for a swing trade, a long position, something like that. So let's take a look at, they've also copied strategy here with their metrics, which is great. It's awesome to be able to have these metrics. Their market cap, just over $500 million. Bitcoin count, 4,636 Bitcoin, MNAV 1.31. Again, that is higher than I thought. Historical volatility at 111%. Debt to Bitcoin NAV, the ratio of debt to their Bitcoin holdings is 19%. So strategy actually has a lot less debt compared to their Bitcoin holdings at 12%. And let's see, their debt is 100 million. They have 100 million compared to their market cap. You can compare it to that, or you can compare it to their Bitcoin. Look at how close their Bitcoin valuation is to their market cap. And again, that's because of the low MNAV, not much being priced in for the rest of their business. Now let's take a look at purchases. This is something I want to see. I want to see active purchases. I want to see more and more purchases. We're seeing possibly a resurgence of buying, but not enough evidence for me to really be sure that they're actively buying a lot of Bitcoin. So in May, they bought 3 different purchases of, 167, 174, 455. In June, they only bought 185 Bitcoin. In July, so far, all right, 7 days ago, they bought 187 Bitcoin. Their year-to-date Bitcoin acquisition, only 29%. Quarter to date, 5.8%. My question is, with seeing this, is are they going to ramp this up? I want to see a lot more Bitcoin buys. I want to see them be able to acquire a ton more Bitcoin. It looks like they have convertible bonds that convert in 2030. So that's really far away. And the embedded call option basically is at 107. And then they also have some options outstanding, which is interesting. So have they bought their own options? Is that what I'm seeing here? Yeah. And their shares outstanding as well. So fully diluted or assumed diluted is this amount. So there's some options that need to turn into shares. And there's some convertible bonds that also will turn into some shares as well. So all in all, I do think there's some compelling arguments for Semler, and I think the biggest one is that it's underpriced and that it will continue and it will actually reactivate the Bitcoin flywheel and acquire a lot more Bitcoin in the future compared to what it did, and that it was stifled by this DOJ aspect, and they'll be able to revamp their business, and the market will value them fairly at some point. So just the reversion to the mean of them being valued fairly, I think, is the most compelling aspect of Semler right now. Will I put some chips on the table here? Will I buy Semler? Maybe after I talk to Joe. Maybe if Joe can convince me. We'll see after that interview that I do with him. Maybe I'll talk to Natalie. Maybe between the two of them. Maybe I'll talk to Eric. Maybe between the three of them, they can convince me to pick up a few shares. Chris did an amazing job here. Again, link in the description for his Ultimate Investment Thesis Guide for Semler Scientific. I really appreciate you for letting me use this. And I'll be looking at some of his other ones as well and be discussing them. I plan to do a really comprehensive full video discussing Metaplanet, which I do own shares of and I find incredibly compelling. And I'm not sure he has one of those, but if he does, maybe I'll take a look at it. But I'll also be doing a lot of my own research for that one and bringing that to you here. And you can check out all my other videos about MSTR, which I've done extensive research and sharing a lot of knowledge on YouTube here about MSTR. So check those out. Again, if you want to book me for a one-on-one, you can do so in the link in the description. And if you need hardware wallet, Bitcoin exchange, Bitcoin node, seed preserving stamp kit, these are all things that you need as a Bitcoiner going into self-custody. These are all the tools you need. And I have discount links and bonus rewards for using my codes, which are all in the description. Check out the links for those. And thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you on the next episode of Bitcoin, Not Crypto.